Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are opening up a file that I have to admit I thought was going to be a pretty straightforward history lesson.
hmm
I saw the name Franz Liszt, and my brain immediately went to classical music. I pictured a dusty bust on a piano, polite applause, maybe a velvet smoking jacket.
Which is the standard image, for sure. It's what most people think of.
Right. But after reading through this stack of research, the biographies, the letters, the music analysis, I realized that image is completely wrong.
Or at least it's a tiny piece of the story.
It's maybe 10% of the story. We aren't just talking about a composer today. We are talking about the man who practically invented the concept of the superstar.
It's not an exaggeration to say he was the blueprint for the modern rock god.
Yeah.
I mean, before Elvis, before the Beatles, before Michael Jackson, there was Franz Liszt.
The sources describe scenes that sound like they're from a stadium tour in the 1960s, not Europe in the 1840s. Fainting fans, actual hysteria, people collecting his garbage as souvenirs. It's
Yeah.
wild.
It really is.
But the mission for this deep dive isn't just to gawk at the celebrity aspect, as fun as that is.
No, because the fame is almost a distraction. It's the shiny object. If you look deeper, as we're going to do, you find a man living what he himself called a tripartite existence.
The three lives. I found that concept fascinating.
Exactly. You have the hedonistic celebrity touring the world and, breaking hearts.
Okay, that's life number one.
Then you have this serious, almost avant-garde musical innovator who changed the very structure of how we listen to music.
And then the third one, which is the twist I really didn't see coming.
The religious recluse.
Yeah.
The man who retreats to a monastery to become an abbé.
It is a massive, massive narrative arc. So we're going to unpack all of it. We've got the biographical data, the scandalous relationship details, the War of the Romantics, and analysis of music that, frankly, was predicting the future.
And to understand how you get a man this complex, you have to start where every superhero origin story starts.
The discovery of the power.
The discovery of the power.
Okay, let's jump into Act 1, the making of a prodigy.
So Liszt enters the world in 1811 in a small town called Dobrojan. Today it's in Austria, but back then it was part of the Kingdom of Hungary.
And looking at his family background, it seems like the die was cast pretty early. His father, Adam Liszt, wasn't just some random bureaucrat.
Adam is a crucial figure here. He was a land steward for the Esterházy princes. Now, if you know your music history, the name Esterházy is huge.
Right, that's Haydn's family.
That's the family that employed Joseph Haydn for decades. So Adam Liszt actually played cello in the court orchestra. He knew Haydn personally. He had seen musical greatness up close.
So when his son, little Franz, crawls up to the piano at age 5 and starts not just plinking, but actually improvising melodies, Adam doesn't just think, oh, that's cute.
No, he recognizes the spark immediately, and he becomes, well, let's say intense is a good word. The sources say Adam diligently encouraged his progress, which is a very polite way of saying he drilled the kid relentlessly.
And it pays off. By age 9, Franz is giving his first public concert.
And it goes incredibly well. So well, in fact, that a group of wealthy Hungarian sponsors steps in. They basically create a scholarship fund to finance his education in Vienna.
So this is the first big pivot. The family packs up and moves to the capital of music.
And Adam, through sheer will, manages to land him a teacher who is basically piano royalty, Carl Czerny.
Now, for anyone listening who took piano lessons as a child, the name Czerny might trigger a little bit of PTSD.
Oh, the finger exercises. Thousands of them.
Exactly. But we have to remember, Czerny wasn't just a writer of exercise books. He was a student of Beethoven. He was the real deal.
The direct lineage. But the funny thing is, the notes say Czerny initially didn't want to teach him.
Right, he was overworked.
He hated teaching children. He called them infant prodigies with a bit of a sneer. But Adam Liszt begged him just to listen to the boy play for a few minutes. So Franz sits down, plays a few bars, and Czerny is just floored.
What did he say?
He later wrote that it was like nature herself had formed a pianist. He was so impressed he ended up teaching Liszt for free for the next year and a half.
That's the ultimate endorsement right there. But there's an even bigger endorsement that pops up in the legends, right? The Beethoven kiss.
Ah, yes.
Yeah?
This is one of the most famous stories in all of classical music lore.
It's such a cinematic moment. It feels like it has to be true.
The story goes that in 1823, Liszt gives his farewell concert in Vienna. He's 12 years old, and the great Ludwig van Beethoven himself, old and deaf, walks onto the stage, grabs the boy, and kisses him on the forehead.
The passing of the torch.
It is the old king anointing the new prince. But I have to be the buzzkill historian here.
Oh no, it didn't happen.
The evidence is very shaky. Beethoven was profoundly deaf by 1823. He rarely, if ever, attended public concerts. Most modern scholars are pretty sure this is apocryphal.
A good story that got repeated.
But the fact that people believed it for so long tells you everything you need to know. Liszt was seen as the heir apparent. He'd carry that weight.
So the heir apparent heads to Paris. The family moves there so he can attend the famous Conservatoire de Paris. And this is where they hit a wall that just feels incredibly unfair.
It was pure bureaucratic nonsense. The director at the time, a composer named Luigi Cherubini, refused to let Liszt enroll.
Not because he wasn't talented.
No. He was probably more talented than the teachers. It was because he was a foreigner. The rules stated the conservatoire was for French citizens only.
Imagine being the guy who rejected Franz Liszt because of his passport.
Oof. Not a great look in retrospect.
But this rejection seems to just fuel him. He studies privately, he writes a whole opera by age 14, Don Sanche. He's touring England, playing for King George IV. He is on the absolute fast track to glory.
Until the floor just falls out from under him. In 1827, Adam Liszt dies suddenly of typhoid fever.
And Franz is only 15 years old.
15.
I want to pause on this because this feels like the moment where the child prodigy narrative just crashes and burns. He's 15. His father was his manager, his teacher, his mentor, his entire support system.
His whole world.
And now he's alone in Paris and he has to support his mother.
It was a brutal, brutal transition. The glamour was gone. Overnight, he had to work. The sources describe him just walking all over Paris, giving piano lessons from early morning until late at night. He was completely exhausted.
And this is where some of the rock star habits start to form, isn't it?
It is. He started smoking heavily, started drinking. He fell into a deep depression and had a crisis of faith. He actually considered becoming a priest right then and there.
Wow.
For a few years, he stopped touring. He was just drifting. He was reading voraciously, hanging out with intellectuals like Victor Hugo and George Sand. But musically, he was kind of stagnant.
He needed a jump start. And according to the timeline, that jump start arrived in 1832. But it wasn't a pianist who inspired him.
No, which is the fascinating part. It was a violinist.
Niccolo Paganini.
The devil's violinist.
Just the best nickname ever.
Paganini came to Paris and gave a concert that basically terrified people. He played with such speed, such violence, and such technical perfection that people legitimately whispered that he had sold his soul to Satan for his abilities.
And Liszt is in the audience for this.
And Liszt has an epiphany, a life-changing moment. He realizes that the piano is capable of that same level of sorcery. He looks at what Paganini is doing, the showmanship, the impossible leaps, the drama, and he says to himself, I will be the Paganini of the piano.
So this isn't just about practicing a few more scales. This is a complete reconstruction of his entire technique.
It was obsessive. He basically locked himself away. He practiced for 10, 12, sometimes up to 14 hours a day.
14 hours? I mean, that's not practice. That's physical torture.
He was drilling things no one else was doing. Double octaves, rapid-fire repeated notes, massive stretches for the hand. He wasn't just learning songs. He was expanding the very mechanics of what the human body could do on a keyboard.
So he goes into this crucible.
And he emerges from it not just as a great pianist, but as a monster.
This sets the stage perfectly for Act 2, the virtuoso and Lisztomania, because when he comes back to the public scene, he's ready for a fight. And he finds a rival almost immediately.
Every great champion needs a foil. For Liszt, that foil was Sigismund Thalberg.
The descriptions of this rivalry are just hilarious. It's like a refined 19th century version of a rat beef.
It really was. Thalberg was the reigning darling of the Paris salons. He was handsome, aristocratically aloof, and he played with this beautiful singing tone. The gimmick was that he never moved a muscle in his face. He was the epitome of cool control.
And Liszt is the complete opposite. He's sweat and passion and hair flying everywhere.
And Liszt, being young and, full of himself, wrote an article publicly trashing Thalberg's music, calling it impotent and monotonous.
Shots fired.
Big time. So the public, of course, demanded a showdown. It was billed as the Ivory Duel.
Do you love that name?
It happened at the salon of the Princess Belgiojoso in 1837. Ostensibly, it was a charity event for Italian refugees, but everyone in that room knew it was a title fight.
So they both play. Thalberg plays his Fantasia on themes from Rossini. Liszt plays his Niobe fantasy. The tension in that room must have been suffocating. And then the princess has to deliver the verdict.
Her verdict is absolutely legendary. She stands up and says, Thalberg is the first pianist in the world.
Okay, so that sounds like a clear loss for Liszt, a public takedown.
But then she continued. She let that sink in, and then she said, Thalberg is the first pianist in the world, but Liszt is unique.
Ooh, that is such a masterful diplomatic sidestep.
But it was the truth. Thalberg was perfect, but he was terrestrial. Liszt was something else entirely. And after that duel, Thalberg's star slowly faded, and Liszt just exploded into the stratosphere.
This is what launches the period that becomes known as Lisztomania.
And we should be clear, we use that word lightly now, but it was coined by the poet Heinrich Heine as a genuine medical diagnosis.
He wasn't being poetic, he was being literal.
He was actually kind of horrified by it. It wasn't just applause, it was mass hysteria. When Liszt played, women would literally faint. They would fight each other to get close to the stage.
I was reading about the souvenirs. It wasn't just asking for an autograph.
Oh, not even close. If Liszt left a pair of velvet gloves on the piano after a concert, the audience would rush the stage and rip them to shreds so everyone could have a little scrap of fabric.
That's insane.
They collected his cigar stubs and wore them in lockets around their necks.
Wait, cigar stubs? In a locket?
Yeah.
That's a new level of dedication.
There are documented reports of women keeping his used coffee dregs in glass vials. There was a level of obsession that was completely new.
So you have to ask, why? I mean, what, was he just handsome? The portraits show he was very striking. Long hair, sharp featured.
He was, no doubt.
Yeah.
But it's the performance style. Before Liszt, pianists played with their backs to the audience or facing them directly over the piano. You couldn't really see their hands or face.
Right.
Liszt was the one who turned the piano sideways, creating the profile position that is standard for every concert pianist today.
He wanted them to see his face? He's thinking about the optics.
He wanted them to see the suffering, the ecstasy, the sweat. He made the music visual. He understood instinctively that an audience listens with their eyes just as much as their ears.
He also completely changed the format of the concert itself. Before him, you didn't go to a piano recital.
No, that word didn't even exist in that context.
Yeah.
A concert was a variety show. You'd have an orchestra, then a singer, maybe a poet, a violinist, and then a pianist might play one or two pieces.
A real grab bag.
Right. And Liszt decided that wasn't enough. In 1839, he wrote a now famous letter where he just declared, Le concert.
C'est moi.
The concert is me.
The sheer arrogance of it. And it was arrogant. But he backed it up. He was the first person to walk out on stage completely alone with no orchestra, no other acts, and play for 2 hours straight.
And from memory, too, which was not standard at the time.
Not at all. It was high-wire acrobatics with no safety net. And the audiences just ate it up. He toured Europe relentlessly. Russia, Turkey, Ireland, Portugal. He played over 1,000 concerts in 8 years.
He was the most famous man in Europe, bar none.
But, and here is the nuance that I think makes him so much more interesting, he wasn't just hoarding the cash like some kind of diva. The research really emphasizes his charity.
That's a crucial counterpoint to his ego. He made a fortune, an absolute fortune, but he gave massive amounts of it away.
Like what?
When the Great Fire of Hamburg in 1842 left thousands homeless, Liszt immediately rushed there to play a series of charity concerts. He donated huge sums to the completion of the Cologne Cathedral. He set up pension funds for struggling musicians. He really established a precedent that the artist has a moral duty to society.
So he's burning the candle at both ends. He's touring, he's composing, he's giving away money, he's dodging screaming fans. It sounds completely unsustainable.
It was. And then, abruptly, in 1847, he stops.
He's just quits.
Cold
turkey.
But he's 35 years old. He is at the absolute zenith of his fame. That's like Mick Jagger retiring in 1975. Why on earth would he walk away from that? He was tired of the circus. He felt that being a traveling virtuoso was, in his own words, a mountebank's trade, like being a carnival act. He wanted to be taken seriously as a composer. He wanted to create art that would last longer than the applause of one night.
So he accepts a job in a small, quiet German court called Weimar. And this kicks off Act 3, the Weimar years and the infamous War of the Romantics.
This is the intellectual heart of his life. He becomes the Kapellmeister, the official music director in Weimar.
Yeah.
And he basically turns this sleepy little town into the European center of the avant-garde.
He gathers a posse.
He does. Becomes known as the New German School.
Huh.
And this group included some heavy hitters like Hector Berlioz and, most famously, a young, controversial composer named Richard Wagner.
And they were united by a specific philosophy about what music should be, a philosophy that caused a war.
A literal war of words and ink that raged for decades. On one side, you had the conservatives, led by Johannes Brahms and the powerful critic Edward Hanslick. They believed in what they called absolute music.
Which means what exactly? Music for music's sake.
Pretty much. The idea that music shouldn't be about anything. A symphony shouldn't tell a story. It shouldn't represent a painting or a poem. It should just be pure sound, form, structure, harmony. It's abstract art.
Okay, so that's Team Brahms and Liszt's side.
Liszt and the New German School were champions of program music. They believed music should be explicitly linked to literature, poetry, and painting. It absolutely should tell a narrative.
So it's like, is music a beautiful abstract pattern, or is it a painting of a story?
That's a perfect way to put it. And to prove his point, Liszt invents a brand new genre, the symphonic poem.
Right. This is a huge innovation.
It is. A symphonic poem is a piece for orchestra, usually in one long, continuous movement that is driven entirely by an extra musical idea. So Liszt writes Le Prélude, based on a poem by Lamartine. He writes Mazeppa, based on a Victor Hugo poem about a Ukrainian hero being strapped to a wild horse.
He's literally painting with sound.
Exactly, and the conservatives absolutely hated it. They thought it was formless, self-indulgent, and that it was destroying the purity of the classical tradition established by Beethoven and Mozart.
This War of the Romantics got nasty, right?
Oh, it was brutal. They were savaging each other in newspapers and journals for decades. It was the major artistic fault line of the 19th century.
But while he's fighting this big artistic war, his personal life is arguably even more dramatic. We can't talk about Liszt without talking about the women in his life.
Liszt's love life was, well, complicated is an understatement. His first major partner was Marie de Gaulle.
That countess.
A countess, yes. And she was married with children. She basically abandoned her husband and family to run away with Liszt.
That's scandal number one.
They lived together for years, traveling through Switzerland and Italy. Those travels directly inspired one of his most famous piano cycles, Année de Pèlerinage, years of pilgrimage.
And they had 3 children together.
They did. Blandine, Cosima, and Daniel. But the relationship was incredibly volatile, and they eventually had a very bitter split.
And then, in 1847, right around the time he decides to retire from touring, he meets Princess Caroline.
Princess Caroline Zuzanna Wittgenstein, a Polish noblewoman, immensely wealthy, very, very intellectual, and
Also married.
also very married.
I'm sensing a pattern here. He liked powerful, intelligent women who were technically unavailable.
He certainly did. But Caroline was different. She wasn't just a lover. She became his manager, his muse, his intellectual equal. She was the one who really convinced him to stop touring and focus on composing. She moved to Weimar to be with him, setting up a home called the Villa Altenburg, which became the headquarters of the new German school.
But they couldn't get married.
Not while her husband was alive. This was the Catholic Church. There was no divorce. So they spent over a decade and a fortune trying to get her marriage annulled by the Vatican. They pulled every string. They paid every lawyer.
And finally, it looks like they've done it.
Finally, in 1861, it looks like they have succeeded. The Pope himself gives the green light. They plan the wedding for Liszt's 50th birthday in a church in Rome. The stage is set for the happy ending.
And then,
The day before the wedding, literally hours before they are to be married, a messenger from the Vatican arrives.
don't tell me.
The annulment is halted. The permission is withdrawn.
What happened? How?
It turns out Caroline's estranged husband's family and even the Tsar of Russia were pulling strings behind the scenes. They were terrified that if she married Liszt, her massive fortune would leave their control and go to this Hungarian musician. So they used their political power to block it at the last possible second.
That is just absolutely heartbreaking, to get that close.
It broke them. The wedding never happened. Caroline became a religious recluse, and Liszt's life took another sharp, dark turn.
This leads us right into Act 4, tragedy, the church, and teaching. The 1860s seem to be just a cascade of one piece of bad news after another for him.
He called it his decade of sadness. And it really was. In 1859, his son Daniel died of tuberculosis at age 20. Then just a few years later, in 1862, his daughter Blandine died in childbirth. She was only 26.
So he's lost 2 of his 3 children. The love of his life is legally barred from marrying him. He's feeling isolated in the music world because of the war.
He felt completely and utterly alone. So what does the former rock star, the great hedonist, do?
He retreats.
He moves into a monastery in Rome, the Madonna del Rosario. And in 1865, he shocks the entire world by taking minor orders in the Catholic Church.
He becomes a monk.
Well, not a full priest. He couldn't say Mass or hear confession. But he became an abbé. He had to shave his head in the tonsure style. He wore the black cassock. He lived in a Spartan cell with just a hard bed, a crucifix, and a piano.
That image is just wild to me. The guy who had women fighting over his silk handkerchiefs is now known as Abbé Liszt, living in a monastery and writing choral music.
And he wrote some beautiful, profound religious works in this period, pieces like his Oratorio Christus and the very stark Via Crucis. But he didn't just stop being Liszt. This is where that tripartite existence he talked about really solidifies.
He divides his year.
He divides his year into 3 parts. He would spend part of the year in Rome, living his monastic life. Then he'd go to Weimar to teach and advise the court. And then he'd go to Budapest, where he was a national hero and helped found their Academy of Music.
The source notes say he was traveling something like 4,000 miles a year in his old age. I mean, that's grueling even today, let alone in the 1870s on steam trains and carriages.
He was restless.
Yeah.
But he dedicated a huge part of this later life to teaching. And this is another major innovation we have to credit him for. He basically invented the masterclass.
So how is his teaching different from a normal lesson?
Before Liszt, piano lessons were almost always one-on-one, a very private affair. Liszt held group lessons. A student would get up and play a piece in front of everyone else, a room full of their highly talented peers. And Liszt would critique them while the others watched and learned.
So it was a performance and a lesson rolled into one. High pressure.
Very high pressure. And his teaching style was fascinating. He didn't care about your technique. He assumed if you were in his class, you could already play the notes. He famously told his students, "Wash your dirty linen at home."
Meaning, do your boring scales and exercises before you come to me.
Right. Don't waste my time with that. He focused entirely on interpretation, on the poetry, the soul of the music. There's a funny quote where a student was banging on the keys too hard, and Liszt stopped him and said, "Do not chop beefsteak for us."
He wanted art, not just noise. He wanted poetry.
But here is the absolute kicker, and this really speaks to the transformation in his character.
Yeah.
He never charged a single penny for these lessons.
What? For decades.
For the last 20 years of his life, he taught hundreds of students, the next generation of Europe's greatest virtuosos, completely for free. He believed that since God had given him the gift of music, he had a moral duty to give it back to others.
That is such a stark, unbelievable contrast to le concert, c'est moi.
It creates this fascinating duality, doesn't it? The ego and the servant. He was somehow simultaneously both.
So let's move to Act V, his musical legacy and a glimpse into the future. Because while he's traveling and teaching for free, he's still composing. And the music he writes in his final years, the old age works, is, for lack of a better word, bizarre.
Bizarre is exactly the right word. If you listen to his early stuff, the Hungarian Rhapsodies, for example, it's flashy, romantic, full of catchy melodies. But his late work, pieces like Nuages Gris, which means gray clouds, or the Bagatelle sans tonalité, it sounds like it was written in the 1950s, not the 1880s.
How so? For the non-musicians listening, what was he doing that was so strange?
He was systematically dismantling the rules of music. He abandoned traditional keys. He was using harsh dissonance, strange chords like the tritone, which used to be called the devil in music, and harmonies that just hang in the air and never resolve.
Why is never resolving such a big deal?
Think of a simple song like Happy Birthday. At the end, on the last note, it feels finished. You've arrived home musically. That's tonality. Liszt in these late pieces took away the home. The music just floats in this anxious, gray, uncertain space. It's unsettling.
So he saw the cliff edge of romantic music where everything was big and heroic and emotional, and he just jumped off into the void.
He completely predicted the breakdown of tonality that would define 20th century music. He was anticipating impressionism like Debussy and even atonality like Schoenberg by decades. He famously told one of his students, "The time for such things has not yet come. I can wait." He knew.
It's incredible. We also need to touch on his relationships with other composers because he was like the Kevin Bacon of the 19th century. He knew absolutely everyone.
And he was, for the most part, incredibly generous. He championed Berlioz when no one else would. He transcribed all 9 of Beethoven's symphonies for piano so people in small towns without an orchestra could hear them. But his relationship with Richard Wagner is the most complex and dramatic.
Here we go, the soap opera part again.
Liszt was Wagner's greatest champion. He helped Wagner when Wagner was a political refugee and nobody would touch him. He gave him money. He conducted the premieres of his operas in Weimar when no one else would. He was his cheerleader, his banker, his promoter.
And how did Wagner repay this incredible loyalty?
By having an affair with Liszt's daughter, Cosima.
He was already married at the time.
She was married to Hans von Bülow, who wasn't just anybody. He was Liszt's favorite student and a brilliant conductor in his own right. It was an absolute mess, a complete betrayal.
How did Liszt handle that? I mean, that would destroy most families.
It caused a massive rift.
Hmm.
Liszt and Wagner didn't speak for years. Imagine the pain. Your best friend runs off with your daughter, destroying your favorite student's life in the process. But eventually, the pull of the music and the fact that Cosima had children with Wagner, his grandchildren, brought them back together.
A reconciliation.
A tense one, but yes. And in a poetic, almost tragic twist of fate, Liszt actually died in Bayreuth.
Bayreuth is the town where Wagner built his massive custom opera house, right? The temple to his own music.
Exactly. Liszt died there in 1886 during the annual Wagner Festival. He passed away essentially in the shadow of the man he had helped make famous, the man who had also caused him so much pain.
Wow. That's a complicated end.
It is, but by that time, I think Liszt was beyond caring about worldly fame or slights. He had lived enough for 10 lifetimes.
So let's try and bring all of this together. We started by calling him a rock star, but clearly rock star is too small a label for this man.
He is the Brudge. That's how I see him. He was supposedly kissed by Beethoven, representing the classical past, and he wrote music that sounded like the atonal modernists, representing the 20th century future. He contains the entire 19th century within his own life and work.
And he completely transformed the piano. He took it from being a polite parlor instrument into a powerhouse that could rival an entire orchestra.
He changed how we listen to music. He changed how we sit at a concert. He changed how we think about the role of the artist in society, from celebrity to servant.
It's just incredible to think about that journey. From the boy practicing 14 hours a day to be like Paganini, to the superstar dodging fans, to the old abbé in a robe teaching for free.
It's a life of constant radical reinvention. He never settled. Just when the world thought they had him figured out, he would change into someone else.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you to chew on as we close out. We talked about his famous, unbelievably arrogant quote, "Le concert c'est moi," the concert is me. It's the ultimate statement of ego.
The peak of his celebrity phase.
Right. But he ended his life living in a monastery cell, serving the church, and teaching the next generation of artists for zero profit. It raises the question, which was the real Liszt?
Was the humility of his old age a genuine penance for the arrogance of his youth? Or was the performance of the humble abbé just another role he was playing, the ultimate act of a lifelong showman?
That is something to mull over. Was the monk just the final costume change, or was it the man he was trying to be all along?
We'll never truly know, and that mystery, I think, is part of his legend.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. If you enjoyed this, maybe go listen to New as Is. It's only about 2 minutes long, and see if you can hear the 20th century hiding inside it. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.